Well, Bryan Habana, I'm sorry it's taken so long for us to see you, but at least there's a good excuse now with our new digs. And having you up in Joburg is a rare thing. I know you're flying out straight after this because you can't wait to get back to Cape Town. But you have got reasons for that. I mean, family are down there, and family is really important to you. You mentioned your wife and your kids when we were talking a bit earlier. How are they all doing?
They're well, thanks, Gareth. I think it's great to be. I think we've done a few virtual things over the last 2 years. COVID, I think, has taken a lot away from us. I'm very much an in-person type of person. I think as much as I believe...
me too. These virtual things are terrible.
As much as I believe there's, ways of working around it and you don't have to fly as much, I just don't think there's something like the human connection.
100%.
So for me, that's why it's great to come up to Joburg, but then, to sort of put my boys to bed at night and have a different environment. So they're well, 8 and 4, turning 9 and 5, getting big, busy.
Do they look like you?
They're actually a good blend between myself and Janine, to be honest. They're a really good blend. There's actually some of my baby photos. I look like both.
Because, the reason I ask is because you and your brother look quite similar.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures of your dad, and he looks similar. So there's a strong gene there.
There's a strong gene, but I'm going to be brutally honest, I'm not the prettiest guy around, so I'm grateful that they got a lot of my wife's good looks.
Yeah,
and
she's very beautiful.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to score brownie points, because I might not be at home a lot this year. But no, they're a good mix, both very fast. I mean, we haven't really sort of put them up, but Timmy's dominating and doing cricket, rugby, soccer, playing the piano because that's his mom's side.
Okay.
The worst thing is I get asked by my 4-year-old, Gabriel, and it's like this constant thing, oh, Dad, please can you draw this for me? And I'm like, dude.
Not your thing.
That part, that gene pool, I wasn't going to. So you asked me to draw a rabbit the other day. I mean, I literally have no artistic ability. Like, stick men figures are horrible. So I draw this buddy that I think looks okay. And he looks at me, he goes, that's not a... And I ran to Janine to ask her, and it was chalk and cheese. It was like a Picasso again.
Did she even know what your drawing was?
No,
I mean, a rabbit's kind of... Draw a rabbit?
No, I'm not going to draw a rabbit, no. No, I'm not going to draw a rabbit. So we've got our split, but she's been amazing. I think as any professional athlete, your partner or your spouse has to sacrifice and offer up a lot for you to live out your dream. We moved to Cape Town. I told Janine it's our forever home. And then 2 years later, I'm like, she's shot roots. France is on the horizon. So I think to all the partners, the spouses who normally live a very single track life because, their partners are traveling, you conquering your own dreams, they're having to give up on their dreams, they, filled with a lot of responsibility. So I'm very fortunate in that, Janine is raising the boys. I think I've been traveling almost a lot more post my career than what I did while playing. So it's been interesting when you try, continue to support, but to have that support structure while you're trying to provide is important. So grateful. 13 years in, we've known each other.
It's amazing.
2002, we actually met each other for the first time. So more than 20 years.
Beautiful.
Dated for 5. So yeah, they're all well. School is busy, and I think in this environment where we're constantly striving and being busy, I think this
but also, I mean, you mentioned how hard it is for the partners of sportsmen and of athletes, but also of people who are in the public eye, because there's always a part of you they have to share with everybody. And for a lot of wives and girlfriends and partners, this is a really tough part of it, because they're sharing you with the public who all have opinions. They're sharing you with people they've never met. They're having to wait while you sign something at a dinner or whatever. And I know you never complain about it. You've always been, people, I promise you, people you don't know, I know, have said, this guy will stop whatever he's doing and have a picture with a kid at the airport, even if he misses his plane. But it has to be tough, especially if you're out with the kids for a birthday or something, and then someone comes up and they interrupt your family moment, which most people never have to deal with.
Most people never have to deal with that, and I think that's, as much as it is, there's many privileges that go with being in the limelight, being a professional athlete, earning lots of money. You almost don't have any privacy, and I think, unfortunately, social media has added fuel to that fire, because all of a sudden you're now obliged to expose your private, intimate environments to the rest of the world. And I've sort of taken a very different stance to that, and I mean, it's been tough for Janine. I told her she can't have a public Instagram profile, and
because she's going to be sharing stuff that you have the experience not to share.
Yeah.
And she'll be thinking, oh, it's her friends and family, but actually it's a whole bunch of strangers too. And
No,
some of them don't have the best intentions.
Yeah, not at all. So, she, befriended some of the huisgenoot people a while back, and like every time something happened in our lives, she was easy to contact because they were friends on Facebook. So we sort of made a decision, and it was tough because you could use that to your advantage. You could become an influencer, you could become a socialite and use the platform to be advantageous in various other ways. I try not to share photos of my kids on social media. So there's a lot of things that we try to keep private. The difficulty, as you said, is when you go to a public environment, which you're making the decision to go to. I mean, we don't earn enough money to be having butlers and sending people to do our shopping. So you try and lead a normal life. And I do feel sorry for the kids because as much as you're just their dad, they see something very different in the public limelight. So, when you're walking in a shopping mall and I have to put them behind my back so that their face doesn't come in, you're constantly holding so tightly onto that hand because kidnapping is now a thing. So, you're trying to protect them.
Nobody thinks about this stuff. And you don't want to think about it all the time because they'll make you paranoid. And then your kids start getting that vibe and they start becoming nervous. But at the same time, if you don't think about these things at all, that's where really bad things can happen.
Bad things can happen. And I think, again, social media is great and there's a lot of good things, there's a lot of bad things. I think the one thing is if you're going to make your life public, particularly your private life, and I've seen many cases in the past where people, they put their families on billboards, on television programs, all this, and it's great when it's going well. But as soon as something bad happens, then everyone's like, oh no, but please afford me my privacy.
Yeah.
So the discrepancy,
you can't have it both ways.
The discrepancy is, you've been living a public life, and you've been sharing intimate moments of you and your family, and it's great when it's going well. So it's not easy. Do I believe there's a right and a wrong? No. I think that you as a person decide how much you want to share, how much of your private space you want to let the whole world into. It's not an easy task, and each to their own. I think we've taken that decision. Janine's hated it at times because there's stuff that she could have potentially capitalized on, potentially from a marketing perspective, or things that I've had said, well, it's our decision, we're together in this, I'll take the brunt for a lot of what has happened. But it's not easy. You try to protect them, and I think the worst thing is about being a public figure is you're always wrong. Like if you don't greet, so like yesterday, classic example, I had my earphones in, walk through security at Cape Town International, put them back in after collecting my bags, and a guy said, oh no, you've just lost a fan. I'm like, what do you mean I've just lost a fan? He goes, oh no, he said hello to you, but you had your earphones in. I'm like, but okay, so does that make me wrong?
I wasn't ignoring you on purpose.
I wasn't. I was just in my own zone or in my own bubble. Now, am I rude for having earphones walking in a public space? I wouldn't think so.
I think if anyone else was, they wouldn't be able to call them rude.
Yeah, but you're public property. So it's a difficult one. I don't think there's a right and a wrong. Unfortunately, most of the times you're wrong when you lay down certain rules and boundaries because, much like yourself, you talk with people in their car, at their house, every day of the week, so they think they know you.
But it used to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it used to be easier for sports people because they didn't ask you political questions in the old days. I'm talking like when you were playing in the 2007 World Cup, when you started in 2004, they didn't come at you with like, what's your stance on, gay rights in the Middle East? You didn't have to deal with that because mostly people knew this was your area. This is what people loved about you. This is what people watched. Now, of course, sports people have to be diplomats.
Yeah, you have to try to be as diplomatic as possible.
And it's tough.
But also not having an opinion is also an opinion these days.
Well, exactly. And if you try and stay quiet about something, people think you're avoiding it.
Yeah, you're avoiding it. So it's interesting. But you talk about that, and I'll never forget the first time I ever took Janine's. So I met Janine's parents, and we went away to the Vaal River, and her mom and the husband and her brother, who was schizophrenic, and early stage that. So we sort of got hotel rooms, stayed at the Vaal, and I phoned one of the local restaurants, massive food chain restaurant. And I was like, listen, it's Bryan Habana. Do you mind if I can just book a table in the corner, like just private? Sorry, Mr. Banner, we don't do, we don't do private bookings. I'm like, well, do you mind, like, please just, when you come, we'll sort out something. Okay, cool. So I think that was the first mistake I made because then we arrived there and they'd like sort of reserved a table in the middle of the restaurant. And I'm like, oh man, this is the one thing I didn't want. And sort of get there, and what I try to do while I'm eating, particularly when I'm with family and friends, is like, just let me have my starters and my main meals, and as soon as dessert comes, I'll be free. But
Sure.
if the one person bothers you while eating starters, it then happens for the whole meal. So that's a boundary, and it's my private time. And these two little boys came as we were eating our starters, and I said, I was like, guys, listen, just come back in like 15 minutes time, I'll sign. They were like, okay, cool, happy days. And I'm about to put I'll never forget, it was like a calamari in my mouth for my main meal. And I get a tap on the shoulder. And I look at this guy, I'm like, can I help you? He goes, I want to talk to you. I'm like, sorry, sir, I'm just eating with my family. He goes, I don't care. And I'm like, sorry, but what do you want to talk? No, how you treat those two young boys. I don't know who you think you are, being so arrogant. I'm like, and he just starts spewing at me for like 5 minutes. The restaurant owner does nothing. These parents that I'm now meeting for the first time have never engaged in this environment. The brother's schizophrenic. And he's like, I don't know who you think you are. I've got Lance Armstrong's yellow jersey from the Tour de France. And I'm thinking in my head, like, did you also bother him while he was at a meal? And you can see this guy was now like the Meneer of the Vaal River.
But you see, also, I'm loving hearing this, because I was never as famous as you.
Oh, whatever.
No, seriously, internationally. But if we talk about this with a lot of people, they're going to go, oh, look at these two guys complaining about how hard it is to be bothered by fans, which it does sound silly when you put it that way. But like, here you are, you're actually doing a whole lot of this not for you, trying to look after your sister's brother. Yeah. I mean, your wife's brother, future wife at that point's brother. You're trying to look after other people and trying also to keep it together with your own kids, like you said in the shopping center. And it becomes like a bit of a game which you actually don't want to play. That's not what you got into this for. And then everybody thinks, well, there he is. He's mine now. I own him. I'm going to get what I need. If it's a photograph or a signature or something. So a lot of this is also, it ties into the things you put your body through. And I mean, you quit after Toulon.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, well, you've still got a lot of athlete left in you. You've got a lot of rugby left in you. But to make that call must have been very tough, because we both know lots of people, you more than me, who've really ruined their body. And rugby takes an enormous toll on the body. I mean, how are you holding up now as you approach 40?
We're literally a couple of months away from 40. I'm still a guy. I think so. I had to retire. I was very fortunate for the greater part of my career that injuries were the last thing that actually kept me off the field. So for that, I'm very grateful. I had to end because I don't have any meniscus left in my knee. So I got bone-on-bone bruising, tried various things to come back and it just didn't work.
It's always the knees, eh?
Well, there's a lot of things. Shoulders, knees, back,
but
necks.
the number of people who have their knees, it's just like a big...
I've been horrible training-wise in the last 5 years since retiring, and I'll be brutally honest. Bit of a mental block, trying to get into a different routine. I use it as an excuse a lot of the times, because when you're a dad and a businessman, a woman, and an entrepreneur, and it's a 12 to 12 baby that you're carrying, you can't.
It used to be something that you found very easy.
It is.
And like being physically fit and active was something that was almost like second nature, right?
100%. The difference is, as a professional athlete, you're getting paid to be fit.
Okay.
Now all of a sudden there's a motivation for it, and you get paid.
Automatic one.
You get paid extremely well. Yeah. You get to experience some phenomenal things. So I think physically I was, grateful, for most of it. To your point, the professional athlete environment is, in my opinion, and I say this with all due respect, is a very unrealistic reality that you live, because not only do you get paid an incredible amount of money to do something you love, you get to travel the world, see places, live a life that very few people get to live, and then you get paid better than the CEO of an organization. And for me, a 15 to 20-year rugby or sporting CV correlates to absolutely zero in business, because if you can't, do a PowerPoint presentation, do a pivot table on an Excel spreadsheet, read a budget or forecast, or maybe even do Microsoft Word, you're so far behind the rest of the working world.
And you're up against this preconceived notion that, he's just a rugby player.
He's just a rugby.
Which I'm sure plagues a lot of guys, and some of them who've done really well in business.
Some of them phenomenally well in business. I look at mine.
Then in the back of your mind, you're always thinking that these other guys in the boardroom are just looking, fucking dumb athlete.
Dumbass. And they often, and someone like Bucky Sporter, for instance, for me, probably one of the most successfully transitioned players, because he was involved in farming and things that he was absolutely passionate about and loved, but got a great understanding. So when the whole wild game industry was booming, Bucky's had been in there for 4 or 5 years already. So the likes of a John Smith, a Farid Dupré, a Bob Skinstad, there's some phenomenal athletes just from a South African context that have gone, Francois Pienaar, what happened in 95,
Phenomenal.
and I was able to, with F&B, with the Varsity Cup, do things that were exceptionally exquisite, was brilliant. So it is tough, when you die a mini death, because that's effectively what you actually do when you give up something you've only known for the last 10 to 15 years. And it's much like asking a practicing lawyer to say, listen, I want you to become a CFO and do an accounting degree. Like if they've not known any of that to now transition, and then all of a sudden you have to start at the bottom of the food chain, because being a professional athlete doesn't necessarily get you an easy in. Yes, it might get you in the door, but if your value proposition is not adding bottom line revenue to whoever you're pitching to, getting a foot in the door is not good enough anymore. So there's a lot of these thinkings that one needs to start understanding when you transition, and I'm all for applying certain skills while you're playing to try and make that transition a little bit easier. But for me, I say balance was the last thing I had being a professional athlete, because every waking minute of my day was solely focused on how I can become the best wing in the world. And yes, I had an off day on a Thursday, a travel day on a Sunday, half day for captains on a Friday, but all that other time, what I was eating, what I was doing, how I was doing things was to become one of the best players in the world. And balance was absolutely
Well, I
skewed.
mean, listen, you got there, and I don't have to go through your CV, but you also knew how to get there. Like you were aware of what you had to sacrifice, how focused you had to be. And that kind of discipline can translate to business, 100%. Right?
It definitely can, and I love telling people that being a professional athlete definitely has many transferable skills that can come or allow you to become successful in the next world.
Sure.
Being diligent, being hardworking, knowing how to sacrifice, knowing how to persevere, knowing how to pivot and adapt. There's a little bit of luck that gets thrown into the mix with being a professional athlete, which no one can really determine what that means or how it comes about. Even though Gary Player says the harder you work, the luckier you get. But my thing is that those transferable skills have to be aptly applied to the environment that you're working in. Otherwise, there's no correlation. And I take, being in a masculine environment where we all thought the same, talked the same, spoke the same. Now all of a sudden, you're in an environment with a very multicultural, diverse, female, male contingent in an office, and I can't be speaking to the women.
You can't do locker room talk there.
You can't do locker room talk. I've had lots of times over the last 3 years with Pay Me Now where you're being a professional athlete, I removed emotion from decision-making situations because I needed to make sure that what I was doing was the best for that moment, not the best for how I was feeling. And all of a sudden you get into a monthly check-in or one-on-one, with a colleague or an employee or someone who's a direct contact, and you need to involve a little bit of emotion, even though you're trying to make the best decision for your business, but the locker room talk and how it just doesn't work. So how those transferable skills are then appropriately applied for you to become successful is much more important to me than the pure cold transferable skill.
So let's just talk about Pay Me Now, because this is something that in this country is particularly useful. I mean, we have people who earn monthly salaries who really should be earning on a daily or weekly basis and only get paid at the end of the month. That's hugely to the benefit of the company and to no one else.
It is. So firstly, earned wage access, the tech platform that Pay Me Now does, we can't own it, we can't claim it. It's sort of been this global
there are lots
phenomenon.
of businesses doing this.
There's a global phenomenon that actually started in the US, back in the late 2010, 2011 period. Went to the UK, other developed market economies, and my CEO was my university roommate, 20 years, approached me with the concept, and I was initially also I was like, no, dude, it sounds like beta lending, sounds like loan sharking, like it's irresponsible. And we actually did some exploration around, to your point, a monthly salary process is just very easily run by an employer.
And it doesn't even make sense for like high salary net, sort of executive C-suite type people, because frankly, it's still to the benefit of the company.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to Vinnie Lingham the other day about this, and he said we should pay people twice a month. Half their salary here and half their salary there. It'll already help with cash flow.
100%.
It'll stimulate the economy in different ways. There are companies already doing it.
There are companies, and I think that the biggest thing that I learned is that, how do we, with a monthly sort of monetary forecast or understanding, then as C-suite level executives who fill their car up with petrol, drive around for a week or two, have mortgages or car repayments, have monthly cell phone contracts. When you're in that line of thinking, and if I was to give you 20 Rand on your credit card that you had to tap the petrol pump in the morning, and then 20 Rand to tap the petrol pump, and you physically need that. For me, I've got no comprehension of what that disconnect of a monthly salary, for those living on a day-to-day basis is like. I've absolutely zero. So for me as a C-suite level executive to now start saying, I want to look after my staff, I don't want my staff to get into a worse off situation, you're actually putting them in a worse off situation.
And then they go to machinistas
or loan sharks, and it becomes, and again, we'll be brutally transparent and honest, we are without a doubt not the holistic one-stop solution. We need to form a part of a greater holistic environment that the employer then offers its employees for the employee value proposition, because the financial wellness plays a component, but so does the mental wellness, so does the physical aspect of that, and how that all integrates holistically to look at your entire holistic wellness proposal for your end user, being your employees, is much more important. So it's been phenomenal. I think we've got over 200,000 with access to the platform
Amazing.
now. Sign on the likes of THD, Bidvest Services, the smaller groups of the world. Had month-on-month growth, for the last 3 years. Got an incredible angel investor who's been with us from the beginning, understood the principle. Looking to go into various African geographies in the next while.
And interesting. I mean, like fintech is still one of the sexiest areas of economic development and where all the cool businesses are. So it's fun to have a foot in that camp as well.
It's extremely fun to, and it's been a massive learning curve for me. I mean, literally being able to, again, I don't understand our tech and our C# and move over to Flutter and, the various back-end parameters that are...
I mean, I still don't know how payroll, thank God I've got Reno now. I wouldn't know how that stuff works.
But yeah, payroll is easy. It's the tech that creates the payroll that's a lot more complicated. But I think just around understanding the growth of business, fintech, it's a buzzword that for me is sometimes you need to be wary of, because where I see fintech to be really cool, really disruptive, is the fact that they offer a very niche service-based delivery that your big institutions can't. So a bank can't be everything to everyone, and so then we almost give our end users, the employees, better service than what my private banker that I pay a hell of a lot of money for gives me. I'm paying money, and these guys at the touch of a button can actually get access to support, asking what's their money, how does it work, and all that on a daily basis. So a very niche offering that is incredibly well serviced, which your big financial institutions, the big beasts of the world, they just wanting growth on various scales, and they can't do that very, I want to say, authentic, emotionally connected service delivery, because they're just worrying about too many things. So it has been phenomenal. We've gone from 4 guys in an office, I think a third of this size, to 30 full-time staff now, going into Africa, and extremely proud. And I almost want to say, like, the cool thing about being in, I think the financial fintech bubble probably burst 2 years ago, where the valuations you were seeing were just ridiculous, with no real bottom line, gross profit happening. So it has been phenomenal for me to learn in terms of, how do you scale a business? How do you put appropriate policies and procedures in place? Because we were on WhatsApp communication. Now all of a sudden you got to go to a CRM, in platform environment to document, because if something happens to one of your employees, what is the business continuity going to be like? So if that person has kept everything on their hard drive or on their laptop, and something happens to that. So learning things about
and
business.
I think, don't you think a lot of companies also learned some very hard lessons during lockdown, huh?
I think a lot of companies learned a lot about, for those that did well, they learned why they were being successful. They created a culture, they created an environment of business continuity, business growth. They weren't keeping all their IP, close to their chests. People were involved, people felt valued. I'm all for, teams and virtual meetings, but that environment where people have created a culture where employees feel valued, because at the end of the day, and I made the mistake in my first week, I had a sales executive join my department, and for me as a business owner, I'm thinking about the business 12 to 12, and I sent her a message, the one night about 7 or 8, or whatever time after business hours. Came in the next morning, and I'm like, listen, did you get my message last night? She goes, well, she's got a thing with her partner where after 7 at night they don't look at their phones, and I'm like, my CEO says, oh, that's pretty ballsy to tell your boss. And I had to then realize not everyone thinks like I think. My employees need to feel valued in a different environment, because for them it's an 8 to 5 role. You try and make it a thing they feel a part of. You give them a why, like Simon Sinek says.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, you're the owner and you're putting process. So it's a very different environment. It's very cool. It's so fast-paced, so fluid, so volatile, to be honest, as well. We've seen some massive fintechs fold in the space of a couple of months because valuations didn't happen, the perceived perception of
a lot of it is also just smoke and mirrors. Huh? I mean, you see some of these big Silicon Valley fintech companies, and they tell you how much they're doing and where they're going, investments pouring in and this, but they can't actually show you a good business case. And when you dig down deep enough, some of them are really messing around.
Some of them, but let's take Uber as a classic example.
No.
Uber do more than 1 million rides a day globally. It took Uber more than 10 years to become profitable.
Yeah.
People think it's an overnight success. People think it just happens. And it is this huge bubble, this huge void that, again, gets filled with noise that we've sort of come across, that people talk about certain things. But it has been cool. Again, where we're going.
Have you had people come up to you and ask you, this is something that happens with people in your position where you've had this amazing first chapter of your life with sport and everything else, and then they want you to mentor them.
Yeah.
And especially when they find out that you're in business. I mean, first of all, what do you think those people are really after? Because with you, a lot of the time just being around Bryan Habana is what they're after. But also, mentoring is not for everybody. Like, I think I'd be a terrible mentor because I don't want someone following me around all day asking me questions. I think they'll probably get in the way. I'll get annoyed. It's not going to help them. It's not going to help me.
No.
You don't have a lot of space in your life for that kind of thing too. Do you take on that sort of responsibility?
So I've definitely got to a point, and that's probably one of my goals for 2023, is just prioritization, because I think you almost allow yourself to do too much, to be too much to everyone.
Spread too thin.
Spread too thin. And I got to a point last year where I was just spread too thin, and I'm fortunate that, again, I can do ambassadorial roles with, Marcus.com, HSBC, MasterCard, Land Rover, do broadcasting work, and my pay me now environment and my shareholders, because we're now responsible to share. I'm a minority shareholder in the company, so we're now responsible and accountable to a greater shareholding group that looks at our bottom line, looks at our, our revenue and where we're going. And to your point, what is being a mentor? I think it's am I being a mentor to my kids, firstly? Because I think that's really important.
Number one, right?
But you also then get people that just want to, and again, I'm not a success in fintech. I'm a part of a successful fintech. I'm not quite where someone like, Vusi Tembakwaya is, because, he's 7-8 years younger than me, already a self-made millionaire on a greater scale. And there's other phenomenal, leaders within the fintech environment. So do I see myself as a leader? I mean, I'd love to mentor and, through the Bryan Habana Foundation, allow young kids from the rural townships to potentially understand the impact that they can have. And mentorship for me is not always about one specific person who needs something. It's about the legacy that you leave on which people can continue building on. Because mentorship, I think, is only as good as the person that's being mentored. Because, what are they learning from that to make this world a better place?
That's a good answer.
Which I think is really important. So I'm probably okay at it. I'm a very people's person, so I'm not like you. I don't mind people in my space. My wife minds people in our space, so I just have to be very careful with who we allow in our space, Mr. Cliff.
Have you made any really stupid investments, and have you done any really, really dumb things, especially since you've finished? Because you joked once in an interview, like buying your clothes for yourself,
No, 100%. So,
which you never thought about before,
you
right?
don't as an athlete.
And coming out of that world where you have someone to keep you on schedule, someone who briefs you before a press conference, someone who helps you figure out when you've got to do this and that public relations event or whatever. And suddenly you find yourself, okay, I'm finished with rugby, and then everything you're on your own for, not just sport.
So I was very much, while I was playing the game, very adamant that I need to keep control over various aspects of my life. So like flight bookings, I'd always done my own flight bookings because it was just important for me to understand, should that need to happen one day, that I know how to do it, that I don't have to wait for a team manager or a liaison officer or an ops manager to book that. You talk about the clothes, as a professional athlete, I can't go to work in shorts and slops, or tracksuit pants.
No, you gotta have that.
Unless you're working for Google where, that's sort of acceptable. But if you're and for me in a professional environment, you have to dress appropriately. And what does a new wardrobe cost? 20 to 30,000 rand as an athlete. Have you budgeted for that? Have you even thought about that?
Yeah, think about it.
Adidas is no longer giving you shoes, or
Sure.
you're having to buy new
We've
things.
got to talk about. Just remind me to come back to this shoes thing. That's
But no, let's not do the shoes thing.
no. I want to go there because I've got the same problem you have.
But to your point, like you need not everyone. So I've tried, and I've made some of the worst decisions financially. And one of the biggest ones was in the year I retired. I had an approach from someone around a fast food chain restaurant environment that they wanted to use as a great opportunity for particularly rugby players to sort of get involved in, understand what it is like to work in a corporate environment, train people, lead people, manage people, investment. And I lost a lot of money. And I look back now and I was like, I was just very much into, I didn't do my correct due diligence. I didn't look, what were the appropriate structures. I didn't look at
and they probably made it sound too good to be true.
But they always do. And everything's always going to sound too good to be true until you get down to the depths of detail. And I was very much succumbed because, firstly, I hadn't educated myself on properly looking at budgets. So I didn't look at what their last financial statement was. I didn't look into the various legal specificities of specifications of what it was all about. So literally 4 years ago, made one of the worst investments ever that lost a lot of money. And I look now and I'm like, that could have literally been a nest egg for my kids that would have put them through school, university, and a whole lot of other things. So I'm not saying
school fees, huh?
I've paid some bad school fees and a lot through stuff that happened with my dad, and there's a lot of things that because and that's the thing about being an athlete. If you don't know everything, or if you don't give yourself an opportunity, just get to know the basics or understand whether you're an athlete, or if you don't know and you're putting your full trust and ownership in someone else managing whatever that subject is, you're going to come off second best because you can't blame them if they've made a mistake. So, yes, I'll put my hand up right in front of the queue, made some horrible investments, and again, have made some great investments, not saying, but crypto 6-7 years ago when you got in initially, there's been a lot of things that are very different.
Did you sell at the right time?
I did not sell at the right time, unfortunately, Mr. Cliff. Let's not get into that. But there are some things.
So you brought up the shoes. So, I mean, being sponsored by Adidas is cool because I'm an addict, a sneaker addict. So I don't have that many at the moment, but I have gone through stages in my life where I'd be buying like 3 or 4 pairs at a time. And then I wouldn't want to wear them because they look so nice before you put them on. And the first time you get a mark on them, you're like, oh.
Especially the white ones, kills me.
Exactly.
Kills me.
But I mean, at its height, because I'm sure that there was a time where they were throwing these things at you every week. And then there are probably times where they're not, and then they'll start again or whatever. And I mean, you've had a good relationship with these guys for a long time. Did you get addicted to sneakers? Like some of the people I've spoken to, we've even done features on this show about people who collect things, right? We've tried to disguise addiction as collection. I had an addiction. I don't think I'm addicted anymore, but have you been addicted?
Yeah, no, I was 110% addicted. So badly. So we've actually just renovated a certain room at our house where we've had to put in a shoe wall.
Okay.
And so between myself and Janine, we've got a fair amount of shoes. And
she's also got this problem.
No, she doesn't have the problem. But I made myself feel less bad by potentially buying myself a pair of Yeezy and then also buying her one.
Oh, okay. So you used her as
I didn't use her. I made my addiction feel less worse for me by adding on. So I'm starting to pack, and I've had shoes in boxes, I think for about 8-9 years now. And I sort of start packing the wall, and I get to my half completed, and I sort of look down, and I've still got quite a few.
Oh, man.
And Janine's like, no, you can use some of mine. And I finished that row, and there's still about another. No, so and to your point, Adidas was, so incredible in giving me, a lot. But I got addicted, and I started buying, literally, Adidas at full retail store value. And I look now at the money I spent
and
that I've never worn.
No, but then keep them because they could still go up in value. I mean, there's a whole market on this.
Yeah,
we talk about markets.com and trading. There are people who have entire trading platforms just for sneakers.
Sneakers. And mine's unfortunately only Adidas. One of the worst things I did was pre-2015, the Kanye West Yeezy craze has just happened. And I'm like, no. And I phone Adidas. Adidas can't help me out. And I'm like, oh, in the UK.
They couldn't help you out. The rest of us were screwed.
No. So I'm like all over getting eBay. So I buy this pair on eBay that like trying to go through, oh, is it a fake, is it replica? No, it's everything. And I get this pair of fake Yeezys.
Oh boy, Hong Kong.
That I paid £300 for. £80 above store value.
Oh.
And they were fake.
See?
And then I made another mistake doing it again.
Even Bryan Habana gets ripped off. For anybody who's listening now.
But yeah, I have curbed the addiction. I must say, it took me about 2 years after rugby, because I just couldn't appropriately validate spending that much money on shoes.
No.
But yeah, so I've got shoes in boxes still, and I've got a full wall that, thank to Adidas, thank you for all the shoes that you did give me. I'm very disappointed in the addiction that you created for me, though.
I mean, what kind of stuff with a family do you get to do that's fun? Do you guys go on holidays? What sort of holidays are you into? I look at my brother and his kids, and they're about the same age as your boys, and also 2 boys. They love going to the beach, and they love going to camp, and they do all kinds of cool stuff like that, which, I mean, if I think about it, they've probably done more traveling. The eldest is now 9.
Yeah.
And he's probably done more traveling than I did at the age of 22, and he's only 9.
No, that's crazy. There's a lot of privilege that professional sports allows you, and traveling was unbelievable. And being based in Europe was fantastic. I mean,
wow.
Timmy, within the first... So Timmy was born 2014. At 8 weeks, he took his first trip to Australia, to Perth, to watch me play my 100th Test match. I think by 6 months old, he'd been to 8 different countries at 8 years old. And Gabriel was no different. We came back to South Africa end of 2018. 2019, we went to Australia, Fiji.
Yes.
I think
your kids have got miles.
No, they do have miles, which I've now put into the family bundle, so they're effectively my miles, Mr. Cliff.
Good.
But yeah, I think spending time away from the public eye. So unfortunately, that does mean being outside of South Africa quite a bit. One of the best holidays I ever had was 2 years ago in the Maldives.
Oof, nice.
It was just phenomenal. Like, no one really knew me there. The boys, like, it was beachfront property, your swimming pool, the sand, the beach.
It's paradise.
It really is for those. But it's very, and it was the first time we had to travel economy class.
Did Timothy pick up any French?
He was actually a little Frenchy, to be honest. So
really?
He got born 2014 in South Africa. Then we all went back, and he literally had we'd come home and he'd be speaking French to the French nanny.
Amazing.
And we'd be like, but he doesn't talk French to us. And then he still got this one friend who, in his mindset, is his BFF. They were like these 3 like little benders. We called them the 3 little benders at his creche. But fluent. And then came back to South Africa, and schooling-wise, we sort of came back middle of the year. There wasn't anything. Putting him in Afrikaans school, which was effectively his 3rd language. Hated it for two weeks.
Sure.
And then started loving it, and then totally forgot his French where one day. So then I tried to keep a little bit of it. I'd read like French books for him at night. And like the one night he just looked at me and goes, "Daddy, why are you speaking to me funny?"
Oh, wow.
And he literally in 3-4 months had forgotten. But it is something I'd love him to pick up at a point. It was a great cultural experience for us, and we've got some incredible friends still there. But he was a little Frenchy, to be honest. Like, Gabriel was a couple of months old when we moved back, so he's no recollection of even being there.
So World Cup coming up, which we spoke about at the beginning of this conversation, and even for those people who are not like ardent rugby fans, like I can't bullshit you. You can tell straight away that I'm not the kind of guy who's watching rugby every weekend.
So you're not going to know who's the tight head or the loose head?
No, I don't even know what that means. But I think South Africans treat rugby as a religion.
Yeah.
There is nothing more serious to some adult men in this country than the score of their favorite rugby team.
Yeah, 100%.
And their whole weekend depends on it. I've seen
the economy of South Africa sometimes depends on it.
It does. It actually affects it. You can see by spending and drinking and everything else, it goes up 100%. And down. But also, I mean, I've met women who are in tears because their husband's a complete disaster after the Springboks have lost. And this stuff happens, so it really matters. Are we going to be all right this year, or do wives have to take out insurance?
I think from a South African perspective, I'd love our Springboks to go on and create history by winning back-to-back World Cups in France. It's going to be the toughest route to the final to actually win it that they've ever experienced since.
You mentioned this earlier, and you said it's because they're teams like Ireland,
France,
were right
New
there
Zealand,
at the start.
no,
Yeah.
100%. So like it's gonna be tough. I'm extremely, I want to say, positive and confident about the actual game playing abilities that I saw at the end of last year going into this World Cup year. And I mean, there's been moments. I go back to 2006. We got beaten 49-0 by Australia in Brisbane a year out from a World Cup. And then a year later go on and win it was phenomenal. This current crop lost the first game against New Zealand at the World Cup in Japan 2019. Went on to become phenomenal throughout that tournament. So if you don't go into this World Cup with confidence, I think you're going to be doubting not only this own team and their ability. I think we've got some fantastic youngsters coming through. I think the coaching staff has opened up a wide net of players that have tasted international rugby and know what it is to lose, because that then spurs them on to want to hopefully win. France, for me, is a special place, and it'll be really cool seeing the Springboks do something.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. But
it's not going to be Japan. For me, and I say this again with all due respect to 07, 95, the Springboks winning the 2019 Rugby World Cup was literally the cherry on the cake. But having experienced World Cups, that Japanese World Cup was by far the most phenomenal experience. The Japanese as a culture. I mean, I was literally watching the South Africa All Black game with Dan Carter in a box. And we had this Japanese couple in front of us, the wife wearing a Springbok jersey and the husband wearing an All Black jersey.
Oh, wow.
They both sang both national anthems. And as everyone was then leaving, the Japanese people were picking up the dirt and everything in the state. It was,
what do you like to watch rugby with? Are you screaming and shouting and jumping up and down, or are you just chill?
In my own environment, I will. And I actually went to watch the DHL Stormers play against a team recently. And I was in the DHL box, and I was with the boys, and they were loving it. Obviously, the cheerleaders and dancers and all the fireworks and everything. And I had this guy, and like, I'm obviously not going to say anything, but I had this guy behind me who was literally commentating on every bit of play. And I'm like listening to what he's saying, and like, I'm like, you are just so not understanding the game of rugby in any. And like, there was a substitution, there was another kicker that had come on. Oh no, that's Kate Volatek. It was not Kate Volatek. It was Duplessis that come on. And I'm like just sitting there like 5 minutes. So when I'm in my own environment, I'm very boisterous and I'll be shouting at the TV. But I think in the public environment, I just tend to take a step back. And I've really mellowed out now. I think I'm very passionate. So watching the 2019 World Cup final, sitting between Sir Clive Woodward, Sir Johnny Wilkinson and Brian O'Driscoll, I was like a kid in a candy store.
Oh my goodness.
So when Chesden scored that try, I was jumping I was literally going bonkers. So in that environment, I felt it pretty apt to do exactly what I want. But yeah, I'm a pretty mellow one, and I love sports. So tennis, seeing what Novak Djokovic did recently was phenomenal.
Yeah,
so,
wasn't that great?
No, unbelievable for a guy who'd been castricized in so many ways.
Sent out and told he couldn't come and play, and he won.
Brilliant.
He won.
Unbelievable.
He won on two fronts.
It was brilliant. So
let me ask you this too, because there is a component to legacy which enters everybody's thoughts every now and then. And of course, your time and place in South African rugby will forever go down in history, not only for your own personal achievements, but because of what you represented and who you were at that time. And that's no small thing. I mean, do you ever feel this overwhelming sense of responsibility, like you have to, like they always said Barack Obama when he became first president of the United States, the first black president of the United States, that he had to do more than just be competent and even brilliant. He had to excel in ways that all the previous presidents hadn't, because he was carrying all these people with him. And the symbolism of that was so big.
I'm going to be brutally frank, I don't. And the reason I say that is I was born in the apartheid era, but I never had an underprivileged upbringing. Like, I got given the best opportunities to succeed. Like, I went to the best schools, and I've said this many times.
Just saying that is a big deal, because these days there are a lot of people who like to play on a narrative.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could say, oh, well, I was bullied at school, or you could come up with something.
No, but I wasn't.
And you could very easily craft that kind of narrative for yourself. It's to your credit that you don't, if you ask me.
And yes, were there racist remarks on a rugby field? They probably were. And so my biggest thing growing up, and I think '95 was a classic example for me. looked at, and I was fortunate, my dad took me out of school the first time I ever drove down to Cape Town, Newlands, to watch the opening game with the Springbok. And I didn't understand rugby and Nelson Mandela and apartheid. I was 12 years old. I mean, what do you understand about the world at 12 years old? But I got to experience the coming together of people from various backgrounds. And I was unfiltered in, like, my dad had me, I had white friends and black friends and colored friends and Indian friends, pink, blue. So color was never an issue. My dad and my mom made us realize as kids the battles and struggles they had to go through, to give us the opportunities that we were being given. And did I have to stand up to a few things? Yes, I did. But I was never going to let people steal my joy. And I think everyone says, oh, but when I meet people of color, like, oh, you mean you're such an inspiration? And I look like, well, am I not a South African? And I think sometimes yes, there is a past, and we can't deny that. But
sure.
I do not have a story like Sia Khaleesi. I was worried about what boots I'm going to wear, or like what car my dad's going to come pick me up in. I wasn't going to school worrying about where my next meal is coming from. So for me to say, like, I'm this person of color that, struggled and I grew up in the apartheid era, I can't say that. And I need to be frank. And I see myself as South African more than anything else. And I think we always categorize according to the color of your skin. And you talk about a legacy. As a legacy, how as a South African are we leaving this environment in a better place? And I think that was incredibly important for me because, yes, I was maybe only, one of two players of color in the 2007 Rugby World Cup final, but I wasn't thinking of it like that. I was thinking about how could I, as a South African, contribute to this team, galvanizing not only what we were doing, but galvanizing a nation, being in France. And
there's nothing that beats, nastiness and prejudice like victory and results, is there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like, that is unassailable.
And then again, people say like, it's because of what happened, the fights and those that stood up for the injustices of apartheid that allowed me to do what I was doing. And I understand that.
Sure.
But my work rate, my effort, my sacrifice, my commitment played a bigger part in me playing 124 test matches for my country.
And you were never ever you were never evaluated on the basis of being person of color X, Y, and Z. You were evaluated as being Bryan Habana.
You'd hope so. I mean, there were times where my form was potentially poor, where people would say, okay, well, it's because he's a player of color. And I'll be like, well, if you become a World Rugby Player of the Year, it probably isn't. But that being said, and I say, like, everyone asks, like, who's the best coach you played under? I'm like, well, that's a very subjective term, because with that subjectivity, in my opinion, comes a lot of luck and support. So
Sure.
if Jake White hadn't, selected me out of obscurity, in Eugene Lofi Elof hadn't moved me to centre, Peter de Villiers hadn't selected me when my form was bad, Alistair could steer down in the Stormers, like, I would not have had the journey if it wasn't for each and everyone on that, on that road that helped me and selected me to be there. So, how do I see things? Hopefully as a South African, and I think as a South African, there's a lot more power in galvanizing and bringing people together if we're all of a sudden rudimentarily immediately putting people in boxes with how we say what color, what gender, what. So
Sure.
as a South African, I'm exceptionally proud to have represented my country, as many times as I did. And I hopefully did it in a way that inspired not just people of color, it inspired young
Everyone.
kids.
And everyone.
Didn't have. So, I was extremely grateful for the life that rugby gave me, extremely grateful for the support structure I had within that to do what I did. For every successful person, man, woman, wherever you're from, you can't do it on, even like I take Novak Djokovic, like he's a brilliant and probably one of the greatest of all time, equaling the record, but he's got a support team. He's got his family, he's got his wife, he's got his training team, he's got his coach, he's got his physio, even him as an individual athlete is doing something phenomenal. So within a team context, and I'm grateful that I had an incredible team supporting me. I hopefully lived up to the standards and values that were instilled in me as a child of humility, of respect, and in so doing, inspire people to be better, to leave this world in a better place. Because I think that's sort of an environment where, everyone's in it for themselves at the moment. And I'm all for that. Be driven, be motivated, be determined to be successful. But are you leaving this world in a better place in every engagement that you're making, whether it be with a janitor that's cleaning the toilet or the CEO of a company that you're meeting? Are you leaving them feeling better about the role they're playing in this very volatile, unfortunate world we live in sometimes?
Well, you're doing that. You really are. You live exactly what you just said, and that's why it's always a pleasure to see you and to hear what's going on in your life and in your brain and in your world. And I can only wish you the best of luck. I hope we're going to have an amazing year of rugby.
That.
I hope you're going to have an amazing year of business and time with your family and all the other good stuff and rugby.
Yeah.
Let's win this World Cup.
Prioritization.
Bryan, it's so nice to see you. Thank you,
Thanks,
my friend.
Gareth. Good to be
Thank
here.
you.